I try to imagine a fellow smarter than myself, and then I try to think, what would he do?
Charge up your axons, ready your receptors, and shift your lobes into upper beta phase. You are listening to Smart Drug Smarts, the podcast dedicated to helping you optimize your brain with the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience, nootropics, and psychopharmacology.
Hello and welcome to Smart Drug Smarts. My name is Jesse Lawler. I am your host, and this is the 127th episode of this podcast dedicated to the ongoing betterment of your brain by any and all means at your disposal. This is Mother's Day weekend of 2016 as we publish this episode, and in honor of that, and because I'm a sucker for doing holiday-themed episodes, this is going to be a Mother's Day special edition of Smart Drug Smarts. We're going to be talking in the main interview with a doctor whose specific medical focus is on improving the health of mothers and the babies that they carry, and of course trying to maximize the long-term prospects, and particularly the long-term cognitive prospects of those children. Her name is Dr. Kavitha Menon, and we're going to be hearing all about her work in the main interview. If you hang around until the very end of the episode, I'm going to give you something which maybe you could actually use to calm down your own mom next time she gives you any grief about what a chore it was raising you. An interesting and counterintuitive fact about one of the upsides of maternity. That'll be in the ruthless listener retention gimmick. But in the meantime, as usual, let's kick things off first with This Week in Neuroscience.
Smart Drug Smarts, This Week in Neuroscience.
Doctors at St. Louis Children's Hospital recently completed a study. Well, actually, the study's not completed, it's ongoing, but published first data from a study on preemie infants, babies that were born before term. Each of the babies in this study were born at least 10 weeks before their due date, so pretty significant. Looking at the development of those infants' brains and how it is affected by breast milk versus baby formula and things other than human breast milk. This was a binary study, and the dividing line was whether the baby's getting more or less than 50% breast milk as their diet. Probably not surprisingly, the babies that got more breast milk wound up when their due date arrived, the date that they should have been born had they not been a premature birth, to have larger brains in terms of total mass and also cortical surface area, as measured by the amount of folding on the surface of the brain. Brains are famously folded, but they don't start out that way. Actually, during fetal development, they start out looking more like a smooth enveloped organ, like almost everything else in the body, but as development progresses, they fold in on themselves more and more and more, getting more surface area, which turns out to be a good thing when it comes to cognition. So anyway, more breast milk for these premature infants led to bigger brains and more folded brains by the time that they would have normally been born, said the study's senior investigator, medical doctor Cynthia Rogers. Breast milk has been shown to be helpful in other areas of development, so we looked to see what effect it might have on the brain. With MRI scans, we found that babies fed more breast milk had larger brain volumes. This is important because several other studies have shown a correlation between brain volume and cognitive development. This study included 77 infants that were born prematurely, and they plan on following these children as they age, seeing how they continue in both their brain development physically and also their cognitive development, says Rogers. We want to see whether this early difference in brain size has an effect on any subsequent developmental milestones. Neonatologists already believe that breast milk is the best nutrition for preterm infants. We wanted to see whether it was possible to detect the impact of breast milk on the brain this early in life, and whether those benefits appeared quickly or developed over time. Further research is going to be necessary to figure out what exactly it is in breast milk that's positively affecting children's brains, and the doctors pointed out that because the babies in this study were born early, it wasn't clear that the breast milk would provide similar benefits for babies born at full term. However, and this is just me editorializing and speculating, it seems like since prior to 40 weeks, normally a baby would just be getting nutrients directly from its mother, and they wouldn't be getting any milk at all since they haven't been born yet. If breast milk is helpful to babies at a point where they wouldn't normally even be getting it, it seems like it would be even more beneficial at weeks 41 plus, where that would be the baby's natural diet.
Smart Drug Smarts, the podcast where smart people talk about smart drugs.
Picked up a couple of 5-star reviews on iTunes, possibly overstating matters just a bit. Jazz Hacker said, the best non-book information source ever, which is very high praise. Goes on to say, changed my life and soon to change the brain longevity of my parents. Thank you so much, SDS, for the amazing content and for more to come. And Neuro Student says, quite simply, this is getting me through my pharmacology finals. Amazing interviews. Well, happy to help with those pharmacology finals, and thank you to your reviewers, and thanks to everybody else that's spreading the word on the podcast among your podcast listening friends and colleagues. Thanks also to those of you that wrote in this past week. I had some questions that I threw out in the newsletter that we do, soliciting some feedback on an episode idea. A lot of people wrote back in on that one. Thank you to those of you that did. If I haven't replied yet by the time you hear this, at least know that I'm feeling guilty when I look at my inbox, and it may still take me a couple of days, but you are not being ignored. For those of you that are not on the newsletter yet, that is but a mouse click or two away and a little bit of typing if you visit smartdrugsmarts.com/newsletter and sign up with your email address. That'll get you about an email a week and is something like a Cliff Notes version of the show combined with some note that might get passed around in class if a student friend of yours is commenting on a teacher. I don't know if kids even pass notes in class anymore or if they're actually text messaging one another. Things have probably changed a bit since I was in a classroom. I want to throw out a thank you to those of you that have been visiting over at axonlabs.io. Axon Labs is where we put out a couple of supplement stacks just about a year ago, actually. Axon Labs is about 2 months from its 1-year-old birthday. Not sure, but we'll probably do something special for that. But we've got a cognitive stack and a mitochondrial booster stack over there called Nexus and Mitogen, respectively, both of which are a regular part of my weekly rotation. My very light breakfast this morning was actually a steaming mug of cacao powder, topped with some coconut oil, and then a couple of Nexus tablets as I knew I was going to be putting this episode together. One of the primary ingredients in Nexus is aniracetam, which absorbs a little bit better if you take it with a little bit of dietary fat. So something like that coconut oil or a half an avocado makes it just a little bit more effective. Anyway, you can see those stacks and the research about all the ingredients therein on the web over at axonlabs.io.
Smart Drug Smarts.
So I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Kavitha Menon, who's a faculty member at the Indian Institute of Public Health and whose career has been primarily focused around trying to maximize the health of young mothers as a necessary first step in maximizing the health of their babies and making sure that those babies grow up as healthy and neurologically well-developed as possible, which is exactly the bridge that I was looking for to try to have a Mother's Day episode of Smart Drug Smarts. We got brains, we got mothers, we got babies, we got all the necessary ingredients here. Scanning down a list of some of the papers that Dr. Menon has participated in, we've got titles like Maternal Iron Supplementation, One Size Does Not Fit All, The Effects of Dehydration on Skill-Based Performance, Dietary and Non-Dietary Factors Associated with Serum Zinc in Indian Women, and on, topics dealing with diet, social conditions, lifestyle factors, and what both individuals and societies can do to try to maximize the health of their next generation. We cover a lot of topics related to health and motherhood in this conversation, some of which are more locally specific to India and other countries in the developing world, and some of which will apply to mothers and prospective mothers everywhere. So well worth listening to if you have any baby making in your future plans, if you know somebody who does, or if you're a public policy wonk and you're looking for ways to get the most bang for your buck as far as highly leverageable social changes that could have a major impact. Things as simple in some cases as distributing iron skillets. Here we go with our Mother's Day conversation with Dr. Kavitha Menon.
My passion is to work with mothers and children, and we have a lot of nutrition issues that influence the growth and development of children. My kind of work mostly focuses on maternal and infant nutrition. We look at nutritional status in relation to the growth and development of newborns and infants, and also currently we are doing some nutrition status assessment to develop some food-based dietary recommendations to improve the nutrition status of urban slum children. So it spans across like mother's health, their gestational status, and how the nutrient deficiencies and nutrition influence them. In turn, the growth and development of newborns and infants. So this is a focus area, and one aspect we have looked into apart from the physical growth part is the cognitive, that's a neurobehavioral health. When we started our work, we started at Nagpur, which is the central point of India, and we started our study looking at the micronutrient status of reproductive age women, because before we went into the pregnant women, we wanted to know how these non-pregnant women are. At our surprise, we found that the women had coexisting multiple micronutrient deficiencies, especially of iron, zinc, and vitamin B12. And at the same time, we observed that there had been some ongoing supplementation program for these women who are pregnant in that particular area, and that program was very vigorous. Multiple micronutrients were supplemented to these women. So we felt it is good to optimize that area to look at how it influences the growth and development of children for those women who are supplemented and who don't take supplements. So that was the phase 2 of our study, where we monitored these women right from the pregnancy stage, followed them until postpartum 1 month, and we assessed the micronutrient status at different stages of pregnancy and also postpartum for both mother and infants, followed by some cognitive measurements using neurobehavioral assessments.
There's probably not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but what have you seen as far as the differences in the cognitive outcomes for, let's say, a healthy baseline baby that has adequate nutrition throughout its development versus a baby whose mother doesn't have adequate nutrition and by proxy, neither does the baby?
If it is a very severe kind of deficiency during the fetal development, definitely it is something of a very large scale, like 10 to 20% of their abilities, or even more, depending on the type of nutrients. If you have severe iodine deficiency, for example, that can actually result in mental retardation in children. So it depends on a whole lot about the severity and the intensity. I should say the intensity of the nutrient deficiency as well as the timing that had happened. If it is gestational, yes, it has far-reaching impact. If it is postnatal, the impact could be reversed to a greater extent, but then also some remains lifelong. So it all depends when it happens, what type of nutrients, how severe or intense is the nutrient deficiencies, and whether it is single or multiple micronutrient deficiencies. It's a very complex thing to answer. Now that I'm with the public health system and a university, we are trying to develop multi-dimensional projects where it can address not only the nutrition part of it, but even the social change component and the behavior change component, so that we can improve the nutrition status of young girls by changing their behavior as well as the nutrition intake. I stress on this mainly because we have implemented a program in India for improving the adolescent health. But that is not showing enough promise. It's not due to poor implementation, but normally you will say the uptake of these programs are poor. So it requires investigation. What are the barriers, facilitators that can improve these programs or the uptake and delivery of these programs? And also we are trying to address the issues, how correcting these issues early can improve the outcome of pregnancy. Gestation is a very crucial period, and it is ideal to get conceived with adequate nutrition status rather than taking supplements after that you know you are pregnant, because the development of brain is so quick. Even 22nd to 23rd day after conception, the child neural tube development is already in the process. So if a mother enters pregnancy with adequate nutrient status, that actually optimally supports the growth and development of the baby right from the beginning of pregnancy. That is an ideal situation. We have other women also who enter pregnancy with much inadequate status. But most of these programs that are aiming at improving the nutrition status, they are giving supplements to women only once they register with the public health system, which happens more or less after 3 months of being pregnant. And you know how important it is to bridge that 3 months gap, because most of that neurogenesis process is already taken shape before you get the supplements. The timing of intervention is very crucial because, like from the early stages of conception through the gestation, the process of neurogenesis is taking shape at different levels. Like the initial stage is more like a neural tube development, but then the brain starts taking its shape with rapid multiplication of neurons, and the axons are formed, dendrites are formed, and then later they enter the maturation process. So it's very important that the timing of intervention should be considered if we are looking for optimum outcomes for our children. Now, when I say timing, any day of intervention, the earlier is the best thing. If we delay that, then some of these changes are irreversible that could have permanent damage throughout the life of children. Whereas if you could correct them quite early, the irreversible damages could be minimized.
If you find that a mother or a prospective mother is significantly below her nutritional baselines, how long does it typically take once somebody is given these vitamin supplements?
That's a very good question, actually, because all nutrients doesn't behave the same way. So that is something we have to keep in our mind. Some of it takes longer time to improve the situation. For example, if you give iron, the challenge with iron is iron supplements can improve the iron status maybe over a period of 3 to 4 weeks. At the same time, we have to see the feasibility of it also. The women are very hesitant to take some of these tablets because of their side effects. So it's hard to say. Those who regularly follow the advice, combining both supplements and improving their dietary intakes for these nutrients. It's actually a time like 3 to 4 weeks, we can say.
Is there any way later in the gestation process or after a child has been born, if they have been exposed to a deficiency, for them to neurologically bounce back, or is the damage more or less unrecoverable once it's taken place?
The most important thing I would like to stress here is this will depend on the severity of deficiency. For example, if you have severe iodine deficiency right in the early stages of pregnancy, some of these changes that is happening to the cognition, the memory might be irreversible even when you recover or improve the nutrition status by supplementing iodine. So if those deficiencies which are very severe, it is difficult to reverse those changes. But some of the nutrients, in case of iron and folic acid, what we have seen is partially they could be reversed. And also at this same time, I stress the timing is very important. Depending on what time these micronutrient deficiencies occur, the outcomes also varies.
Big picture, is there one single greatest area of deficiency within women's diets globally, worldwide, that people should be most focused on? Let's say a major international aid organization were to try to wave a magic wand and fix one problem. What magic wand should they wave first?
The most important thing we should aim is catch them when they are young, right at the adolescent stage, prepare them properly before they conceive with adequate nutrition. That even includes protein energy supplementation, because like countries like ours in India and all, we have almost like 60% of our adolescent girls who are undernourished with chronic energy deficiency and anemia.
Wow.
And they are often married off early, even before they acquire their maturity. So that actually double the burden of motherhood. One side you are growing, you don't have nutrients adequately to support the growth. On the other side, you are pregnant and you have to support now a growing fetus. So this has been a very enormous problem for us. And the most important thing we are realizing is it's not just micronutrients alone, even supplementing them with adequate amount of protein and energy. That is also important. That will actually improve the status in much better way rather than giving them only micronutrient supplements.
Right.
Because they will be better absorbed, better utilized. If the child is undernourished, the mother is undernourished, even the circumference of brain will be low. So if you look at the head circumferences, you will see a large change between the healthy children and the undernourished babies. Now, coming to the most pressing problem, I would say worldwide anemia or iron deficiency is a major issue. Now, apart from that, if you look into the developing country situation versus developed countries, you will see developing countries have multiple micronutrient deficiencies in addition to the existing undernourished status. Whereas on the developed country side, you will see more of specific nutrient deficiencies such as iodine, depending on the area. For example, if you take UK, you will see iodine deficiency is a major problem. The European countries in general, and now they are trying to improve it through iodine supplementation for pregnant women or through food fortification using channels of bread or other food items to improve their iodine intake.
That's interesting to me because I know iodized salt has been a fairly standard thing, at least in the Western diet, for a long, long time. But even with the high levels of salt in a lot of foods, is that not?
The challenge there lies is like one thing what we see from my experience in New Zealand, Australia, and in some European countries is that people are very conscious of taking salt. So if you use salt as a medium to control iodine deficiency, that may not be a really successful step in Western side.
Right.
Probably you need some food fortification, like what New Zealand has done is they have fortified their bread And they are seeing that people who consume 2 slices of bread a day, actually they are more closely meeting the iodine requirements. So some other channels we require to improve the nutrient status in those settings, while if you look into the developing countries, iodized salt has been a great success because people use iodized salt to cook their food samples and they have not so much of restriction on salt consumption.
So sufficient levels of iodine are really important, and iodine deficiency is recognized as a big problem. Can you give us a quick biology lesson reminder of what it is iodine does for us, how it works with the thyroid, and that leads to brain development?
When you have adequate iodine in your diet, your brain growth is normal. The function is mainly through the functioning of thyroid gland. And you know that thyroxine hormones are required for fetal growth and development. And that includes even the brain development. When you are deficient, what happens is the level of iodine goes down in thyroid gland, and that results in a decrease in the secretion of thyroid stimulating hormone, which in an attempt to increase the thyroxine secretion enlarges. And that is a condition we call it as goiter. And goiter, a pregnant woman with goiter the baby will suffer a lot because the fetal development, especially the brain development, will be largely influenced.
So iron and anemia, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, that even something as comparatively simple as cooking food in like an iron skillet give a significant impact to the amount of iron that makes it into the human diet. Is that not correct? Or is it that even things like making sure that every man, woman, and child has an iron skillet at their disposal is prohibitively difficult in some areas?
Actually, if you look at a couple of decades back, majority of the houses used to have iron skillets to cook, and to some level that actually helped to improve the iron intake. It is true that some level of iron you get when you cook food in iron skillets, but over the time iron skillets have disappeared from the kitchen, and now we have more or less all the cookwares that are non-stick or aluminium based,
right?
And that is changing even the intake of iron.
That's unfortunate to see that what we think of as a technological upgrade is actually a nutritional downgrade.
Yeah, we are losing something very precious from our kitchen in terms of intakes of iron.
For pregnant women or prospective mothers that are listening who are in a more developed country, maybe the USA or Western Europe, something like that, what are some of the most important areas that they should be paying attention to?
I would say in those societies, the most important thing we have to keep is keeping the body weight optimum before being pregnant, because overweight and obesity also have impact on cognition of children. So that is something very important in Western countries. Before being pregnant, they have to have a normal body weight, not overweight or obese. Second is iodine deficiency is common in those countries. So that would be something to take care, use of iodized salt or iodine fortified food items before being pregnant or before being conceived. But the second thing I would say is once you know that you are pregnant, it is advisable to go for a iodine supplement, and also to check whether you are adequate in iron, because it is important to keep iron content also normal. So it's important because many of the other deficiencies are very less common in US and New Zealand, except for iodine, selenium, iron. These might be the major issues.
That's really interesting about an overweight mother having potential cognitive outcomes for her fetus, her baby. What's going on there that makes that the case?
Actually, what happens is when you put on too much of weight during pregnancy, that will actually trigger a lot of issues that may put the baby at risk with chronic conditions at a later stage. And plus that the extra weight will press the growing fetus, and adequate space for the growing fetus will be less, and that might even cause growth retardation, or that is called as IUGR, that's an intrauterine growth retardation. And children who have IUGR, they have poor development, for the poor brain development and cognitive abilities.
When you think about a newborn baby, the actual percentage of the baby's body that is the head is really huge. It seems like compared to an adult, I mean, your head isn't that much of your body, but for a baby, it's...
Yeah, normally when a baby is born, the head weighs more compared to the body even, because that's a large part to come out of the womb.
Yeah.
And that's very normal.
What have you discovered in your studies that has been the greatest surprise to you versus maybe what you thought you might find?
To me, the most important thing that came out from the huge study we have done in Nagpur was there were two things actually, I should say. First phase, when I saw that women are having multiple micronutrient deficiencies, I was very surprised. We expected iron and iodine, but we ended up seeing many other deficiencies also among them. So that actually opened my eyes because majority of the public health programs in India, they mostly stress on iron and folic acid, but they don't consider other micronutrients. So in a way, when you supplement only a few of them, like for example, iron and folic acid, what is happening is they have a bearing on the nutrition status of other micronutrients because these micronutrients interact with each other. For example, I can give you when you supplement anemic children with iodine alone for improving their iodine status, they may not show that improvement unless you supplement it together, iron and iodine together. So these interactions are largely overlooked. And at one point of time, we felt what we require for not just iron and folic acid, they require multiple micronutrients, multiple mineral and vitamin tablets that might improve their status compared to just giving them iron and folic acid. And second thing, the most important thing that we published this year was from the same study, the timing of anemia and impact on growth of children. What we saw was women who were deficient in the second trimester, more impact on the neurodevelopmental side. Children had impact on their growth and development, especially on the physical growth also. So that was something which we never expected. Even that's influenced by trimester can have influence on the growth of children. And once the children are undernourished, they remain undernourished with an intergenerational effect. And that is what we fear actually when we do such studies. And if you look at the literature also, it takes years to get out of it and the change is very slow. So this is something boggling our minds now, how we can help these kids because stunting also have impact on cognition. And just feeding them is not enough. There is something beyond that nutrition part of it, which comes from the socio-political commitment to drive these changes in the community.
Yeah, it's an interesting sociological question because there's obviously limited resources to distribute among many people that need many things, but it just seems like the benefits from prioritizing mothers and then babies in maybe the first 2 to 3 years of life, that so outweighs the potential benefits of putting resources towards almost any other segment of society.
Yeah, that's true. And also what we see is it's not just adequate enough. We supplement the women when they are pregnant, but we need to address this early. And especially the girls, they are going to start an early pregnancy. In majority of these countries, in developing countries, you can see they get them married somewhere between 15 to 18. If we need to address that, that means even you require a social change. Let the girls mature enough before they conceive with adequate nutritional status. That requires a lot of commitment from the government as well as even from the political and socio-cultural change.
Now, I know in India, there's famously a large number of vegetarians. Is that something that has any bearing one way or another on the nutritional quality of the women's diets?
Partly yes, partly no, because vegetarian diets are quite healthy in a way. But what we require is a conscious approach to consume the right foods in adequate quantity. And the most important deficiency you would see in vegetarians would be B12, vitamin B12 deficiency, which actually could be corrected by taking some yogurt and some of those fermented food items.
Yeah.
So vegetarian diets are not poor actually. The combination of foods they take, if that is correct, that can go miles for improving the cognition and brain health. Because what we are seeing is when you consume even fried items and non-vegetarian items too much, that also has a bearing on brain health. So it's not just a question of being vegetarian or non-vegetarian. Yes, that might have a role in iron intake because many of these vegetarians don't take any of the animal products. So animal products have easily available iron. But what alternatively you can do is when you combine and use food items, not singly, but a combination, that can actually give you better amount of nutrients than focusing on even non-vegetarian foods.
In India, where you're working, are the problems in the diet mainly a result of lack of access to food, or is some component of it literally just people not knowing what they should be eating, lack of good food education?
I would say it is a combination. Now, if you go into the different income levels, for example, you go to an urban slum where we are currently now working, what you see there is lack of access to quality food. And food security is an issue in majority of those families. But if you look at the middle income groups and the high income groups, it's not due to lack of access to food, but it's more due to ignorance and lack of information about choosing the right food for the right age groups. And I would stress this mainly in the case of infants who are above 6 months and below 12 months. Especially during that weaning process, the right complementary foods are not often chosen by these mothers because they don't know what to give to the baby. A major change that is happening now in many of those sites are, one, many small packets of fried items are getting into the children's diet. Like you get small, fried, easily consumable products like Lay's.
Yeah, fast food sort of stuff.
And children get the taste of it, they get accustomed to it. So that is something that is boggling us at this stage, because once children consume those snack products, they don't feel hungry for a long time, and those products are replacing their normal diet, which is healthy otherwise, including like a combination of cereal and pulse with vegetable, which is very healthy for them. But majority of it is getting replaced with these kind of snacks and the related items. So that is actually putting them at risk and undernutrition. Now, second thing is choosing the right complementary food is very important, and using less amount of sugar in milk and the related products they feed children. Actually, milk doesn't require extra sugar, but what we see is when mothers feed children with cow's milk or buffalo milk, they add at least 2 to 3 scoops of sugar into it, and then that they feed the children. They get used to the taste of it. And next time when you give them milk without sugar, they are not willing to take it.
Right. It's like we're addicting children at an early age.
Yeah, that is true. And also we need to introduce the culture of having salads and fruits every day in the diet right at that stage, because the food habits develop in children between 6 months to 5 years. So if we teach them the right habits at an early stage, that can go a long way because they will get used to that kind of system. And having a very good diet, normally we say a good dietary diversity is a very good thing to follow, meaning more use of fruits, vegetables, as well as having a variety in the diet. That will pay a long way.
Smart Drug Smarts.
So thank you so very, very much to Dr. Kavitha Menon for taking the time for that interview. That was a very difficult one to schedule, actually, between time zones and trying to get it in before Mother's Day. And the fact that Dr. Menon keeps a very, very busy schedule with boots on the ground there in India, really working to make a difference at a local level. Some of us are sort of single-issue voters and have our hot-button issues, and for me, this isn't something that necessarily gets pandered to that much by politicians, but I tend to like anything that's going to benefit public support of brains and fostering people's curiosity, things like that. And it seems like of all the places that we could spend health dollars, and particularly preventative health dollars, we'd be hard-pressed to come up with a better place to spend those dollars than on protecting the health of newly pregnant women or women who are at a pre-pregnancy stage in their life, both with education and nutrition, and then of course the first year or two of the child's life, particularly while they're still nursing. The overall leverage that you get on any sort of beneficial intervention that early in a person's life cycle is so much better than anything that you could do for a kid later in the kid's life or as a teenager or quite obviously as an adult. So anyway, congratulations to Dr. Menon for doing amazing and important work. Happy Mother's Day to everybody out there, both current and future mothers. And future mothers particularly, take heed of what was said there about the importance of dietary iodine, dietary iron, not putting on too much weight during pregnancy, and of course getting the best medical checkups that you can get with your doctor early in the process so that you can make sure you're setting up your baby with the best chances of success. And now we'll move along to the ruthless listener retention gimmick, but as I mentioned, we'll keep this one on theme for Mother's Day.
Smart Drug Smarts, ruthless listener retention gimmick.
So it is certainly conventional wisdom that having children is a lot of hard work. And at some point you've probably heard somebody, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's a movie character mom or something like that, say, you kids are going to make me old before my time, or you'll be the death of me, or something like that. And certainly the conventional wisdom is that having children and the efforts involved in raising those children, it tends to age a person faster than they otherwise might if they did not have those kids. This sort of thing could be tested biologically. One of the major biological markers for aging is telomere length. Telomeres are the little end caps on the end of chromosomes. They get shorter as cells divide throughout our lifetimes. You start out as an infant with very long telomeres. By the time you're old and your telomeres have whittled down to little nubs, that is not a good thing for the long-term health of your chromosomes. So all else being equal, longer telomeres are indicative of a biologically younger organism. And so one would think, and previous studies have indeed shown, that having more offspring tends to lead to an accelerated shortening of telomeres. In other words, if you're a mom with more kids, you're more likely to be aging faster than another female in your peer group that has less children or no children at all. But these other studies that have been done have not been done in human populations. They've been done in animals. Recently, the results of a 13-year-long study of women in Guatemala, women who are in their child-rearing years, looked at their telomere lengths at the beginning and the end of the study along with how many children they had, and found that contrary to expectations and contrary to the animal studies, the Guatemalan women that were having more children were aging less fast than the other women in their cohort that were having less children. This was not what they expected to find. The scientists have a couple of speculative ideas on why this might be happening, but nobody is sure yet. One, at a purely biological level, there's a steroid that's secreted by women during pregnancy called estradiol, which goes up to about 200 times the non-pregnancy levels, and this is known to act as a protective factor on telomere length. So according to one theory, by being pregnant more often, a woman is exposed to less oxidative stress because of the increasing amount of circulating estradiol within her body during at least part of this time. The other theory put forward is a much more cultural one, and that is that because within humans, child-rearing tends to be a multi-party affair. When a woman has a baby, she's probably getting help from other family members. There might be multiple generations involved, extended family, things like that. Human mothers may have a lot of community support that the animal mothers in these other species that were studied did not. And so it might be that a human mother is actually having to expend less effort as she has more children versus an animal mother that would have to expend a lot more effort. This definitely flies in the face of conventional wisdom, and I can almost hear the hackles going up on a lot of women, like I'm imagining my mother saying, there's just no way it's less effort to have children than to not have children. But one way or another, an interesting finding in this study. Needless to say, this is the kind of study it's tough to do a follow-up on that's anything more than correlative. You can't force people to have children, and you certainly can't do anything that would try to cause stress to a pregnant woman or a new mother and see how their telomere lengths respond. But anyway, a hidden upside for having children.
We like to think of ourselves as a digital speakeasy for brain hackers, but you can call us Smart Drug Smarts.
Okay, you heard it. That is the entire episode number 127. Thank you for hanging around until the end. If you want to leave us a nice glowing review on iTunes and say hi mom in the review, I will say hi mom to your mom on the air. I'm certainly not above doing that. So consider that shameless bribe available for taking. If you want to send this episode to your mom, the link will be at smartdrugsmarts.com/127. Last week's episode, we talked with Professor Con Stow about Bacopa in episode number 126. Next week, we got, a grab bag of really cool possibilities, some great interviews recorded. We've got stuff coming up on substances from chocolate to LSD, but I haven't decided yet about what we're going to do for episode number 128, so you'll need to tune in next Friday. One last bug in your ear about the Smart Drug Smarts newsletter. You can sign up for that at smartdrugsmarts.com/newsletter. And I think that's everything. I will be back at you next week, same time, same podcast, and with the same unflagging commitment to helping you fine-tune the performance of your very own brain. Have a great week in the meantime, and stay smart.
You've been listening to the Smart Drug Smarts podcast. Visit us online at www.smartdrugsmarts.com and subscribe to our mailing list to keep your neurons buzzing with the latest in brain optimization. Smart Drug Smarts should be listened to for entertainment purposes only, although some guests on the show are medical doctors, most are not, and the host is just some random guy. Nothing you hear on this podcast or read at smartdrugsmarts.com should be considered medical advice. Consult your doctor and use some damn common sense before doing anything you think might have a lasting impact on your brain.